This lesson is called Mark of an Equanimous. In this lesson, Arjun inquires from Lord Sri Krishna how one can recognize an equanimous person. The Sanskrit word for the equanimous person is sthit prajna, one who is self-collected and steadfast. In this lesson, we together with Arjun are learning what is a sthit prajna. In the future lessons, we will learn why to become a sthit prajna and how to become a sthit prajna. And what if we decide to become or not to become a sthit prajna? In verse 2.54, Arjun inquires, what language does a sthit prajna speaks? How does a sthit prajna conduct himself? Arjun wonders if such a person exists, then why haven't he met one? Or perhaps did he meet a sthit prajna but he couldn't recognize him and he didn't want to miss him again. So he inquires from the Lord how to identify such a person. We must all listen closely so that even we can learn what is a sthit prajna and also instantly recognize one if we see one or meet him or her. In verse 2.55, Lord describes how a sthit prajna behaves and conducts himself. Lord says that a sthit prajna, having forsaken all worldly desires, is absolutely content with his own companionship. He possesses a stable reasoning, meaning that when a person who abandons all desire for worldly pleasures, be it for a big home, a high-paying job, a fancy car, a beautiful spouse, a big bank balance, etc., etc., there is nothing left except being content. Ask yourself, what is it that you want? Do you want to have a home and still want a big one? Do you have a car but you need a new one? And what not? Now for a moment, just remove all those thoughts from your mind. Then only satisfaction remains, nothing else. And if you remove all those wants, then you also don't have the want of gathering an audience to show off your toys and possessions. And hence, you won't need any company either. You will experience a steady reasoning, which is, were all those things really necessary? Were they needs or wants? Because needs can be fulfilled with little effort, but wants, on the other hand, wants are never satisfied. You can buy the latest phone, the latest car, the biggest yacht or plane. There will always be someone possessing a better one. And so the wanting game in you starts all over again. Unless you abandon the want, there cannot be satisfaction. And the moment you forsake want, it is replaced with stable reasoning and satisfaction. In verse 2.56, the Lord says that such a stable sage then becomes indifferent to a crisis or elation, free from passion, fear, and anger. What are the two most memorable moments in a person's life? One when he is very happy and passionate, and another when he was very sad, fearful, or angry. Let me tell you a story about two neighbors, Chandru and Sattu. One day, Sattu bought a brand new car, which also happened to be Chandru's dream car. Sattu was very happy and elated about his new car. But Chandru was sad and angry that he couldn't buy it. You see that the same object has evoked different feelings in two different people. But when you rise above both the feelings of happiness and sadness and become immune to such feelings, you become a sthit prajna. In verse 2.57, Lord says that a sthit prajna, when unattached in every way, neither rejoices nor bemoans when he gets fair or foul. He becomes stable and steadfast. If Chandru had remained unattached to his ego, which was hurt because his neighbor Sattu's car was bigger and better, then it would have not affected him at all. He would have developed the attitude of, who cares what Sattu, or for that matter, any other neighbor buys. He would have developed an indifference. In verse 2.58, Lord says that like a tortoise who withdraws his sense organs attains poise. Lord is talking about being able to control our 10 senses instead of them controlling us. We humans possess 10 plus 1 senses. The 10 senses are divided into 2. They are called Gyanindriya and Karmindriya. Gyan means knowledge, and the senses that are used for gathering knowledge are eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. The other 5 senses are called Karmindriya, or the organs with which we perform actions, like our voice, legs, hands, anus, and genitals. And then there is the one of the 10 plus 1, which is the mind, which is also a sensory organ, but is different from the rest. The Lord says that when a person is able to withdraw the senses from his organs, meaning that you see a delicious dish made by the finest chefs in the world, but you don't get tempted. You see the finest wine, but you don't get tempted. You see the most beautiful person, but you are not tempted. You get the idea. Only when you are able to resist such temptations, you become a sthit prajna. In verse 2.59, the Lord says, upon realizing the truth, desires recede from the mind of one who abstains. So does the affection. Meaning that when a person realizes that everything around him is superficial, the best example would be the movie Matrix, which is inspired by Shrimad Bhagavad Geeta, as are so many other biggest Hollywood hits, like the recent Bollywood blockbuster Avatar. There's one movie about karmas. It's called Cloud Atlas, starring Tom Hanks and Halle Berry. If you have watched and liked those movies, then you know the gist of Shrimad Bhagavad Gita. After watching my videos, you will be able to relate to those movies and completely understand their underlying foundation. In verse 2.60, the Lord cautions Arjuna about the strength of the senses and reminds us that they can influence the most tolerant and brilliant minds. I'm sure you must have heard the story of great sage Vishwamitra. Sage Vishwamitra was one of the most respected and revered sages in ancient India. Even the devas were frightened by him. Devas are the demigods. When sage Vishwamitra tried to create another heaven, Indra, the king of Devas, frightened by Vishwamitra's powers, sent an Apsara named Menka. For the lack of better word, Apsara is roughly translated to be a celestial nymph from heaven. King Indra sent Menka to earth to lure sage Vishwamitra and divert his mind from meditation. Menka successfully incited Vishwamitra's lust and passion. When he saw her beauty, he forgot about meditation. She succeeded in interrupting sage Vishwamitra's resolute meditation by seducing him. Hence, the Lord says that many great minds have been swayed by their senses. In verse 2.61, the Lord says that only those who are devoted to Him can keep their senses under control, and those who are able to discipline their senses become stable. We will learn in the upcoming chapters. The Lord will explain how to stay devoted and to discipline the senses. In verse 2.62, Lord Shri Krishna says that the root cause of all anguish is desire and attachments that the mind dwells upon. It could be for an object, a person, a place, etc. Whatever we come in contact through our five senses of vision, hearing, smelling, tasting, or touching has the power to make us form attachments, and from attachments, desires are born. And when those desires are unfulfilled, they turn into anger. Let's understand this with an example. You are watching your favorite program on the television and you see an advertisement for the latest mobile phone. So you see an object, the mobile phone in this case, and your mind develops a desire of holding it and showing it off to your friends. But you can't afford it. And when you see someone else carrying that same mobile, a sense of anger takes over. Another example would be that every morning you drink a particular brand of coffee, and you cannot imagine yourself starting your day without that coffee. So you have developed an attachment to that object, which in this case is a particular brand of coffee. But one day your wife prepares another brand of coffee and you don't like it and get angry. Why did that happen? Because you were too attached to that brand of coffee, and when you couldn't get it, your desire was unfulfilled and it turned into anger. These were two simple examples. People develop attachments to other people, other objects, or even ideas. And when their desires for those attachments remain unfulfilled, they get angry and do stupid things. Now is the time for an exercise. Write down what you are obsessed with, which has resulted in unfulfilled desires which make you sad or angry. Okay, continuing. In verse 2.63, Lord Shri Krishna further says that anger makes a person do irrational things. Let me tell you a story about several young girls who committed suicide when their film superstar Rajesh Khanna got married, because they had all dreamed of becoming his wife. But when they couldn't, They became so angry, so confused, and unreasonable that they ended their own lives. They forgot about everything else. Their attachment and their subsequent desire with the film superstar was so immense that they lost their capacity to think straight. Even when they knew that no matter how much they loved the superstar, he was never going to marry them. A sane person would know that. But their desire drove them insane, and they were lost. In verse 2.64, Lord says that when a person renounces affection as well as aversion, the senses become free and doesn't form attachments, and one's mind comes under a person's own control and not vice versa. Becoming the master of one's own mind, a person becomes conscious of his true self and finds peace. Okay, time for one more exercise. Write down the list of things that you desire the most. Then reduce the first list to half and then half again. For example, if you have a list of 12 items, most desired things, strike out 6 of them. Then reduce those 6 to 3. And then start thinking very hard. Do you really need those remaining 3? If you are able to strike out the last remaining 3 from your list, then write down how you feel. In verse 2.65, Lord Shri Krishna says, "You will find tranquility, and with tranquility, your reasoning will soon be steadied." That will only happen when you have no object, idea, or relationship left on your attachment list or your desire list. The attachment not only applies to material objects, but also to immaterial things like ideas or relationships. When you break the attachment that was tethering you to that object, idea, or relationship, you realize that in fact, those same very things were the cause of your unhappiness or anger. In verse 2.66, Lord Shri Krishna says that you will only get happiness when you have peace. You will only have peace when you meditate. And you can only meditate when your mind and senses are under your control. That is why people find it very difficult to meditate, because their mind wanders to the objects, the ideas, or the relationships. And when they sit to meditate, so they are unable to concentrate. So the first step to finding happiness is to remove all attachments or desires. Then, when you have achieved that, you will then have a mind that would wander when meditating. And then you will have peace. And once you have peace, you will experience happiness. People try to find happiness in buying things or in other people's company, and that is why they end up disappointed. In verse 2.67, Lord warns us that sensual desires are very strong, like the wind that astray an unanchored boat. Sensual desires are the most strongest. And remember that story I told you about sage Vishwamitra, who was seduced by the celestial being Apsara. Lord Shri Krishna mentions an unanchored boat. The anchor that will keep you in place is meditation, and which can only come if you wipe out all attachments towards objects, ideas, or relationships. But if such a great sage could fall prey to his sensual desires, then what can happen to us mere humans? It is difficult, no doubt. It is not impossible. The best way to avoid the best way is to avoid ending up in a vulnerable situation. In verse 2.68, Lord Sri Krishna says that only those who have completely withdrawn their desires can establish steadiness of mind. As I said, it is difficult but not impossible. In verse 2.69, Lord says that the self-controlled Muni or hermit remains awake when others are sleeping and sleeps when others are awake. In this verse, Lord instructs those who have controlled their desires to teach others about it. The hermit who has awakened to the reality of self is akin to the person who is awake when others are still asleep and unaware of their true nature and self. It is this hermit's duty to awaken others from their slumber, and he must not rest till others are awake. This is exactly what I am doing. I am awakening you. And once you are awake, you must awaken others. It becomes your duty. In verse 2.70, Lord compares the hermit's heart to that of an ocean, which remains still even when thousands of gushing rivers steadily pour into it. The desires keep flowing like the gushing rivers even in the heart of a hermit or someone who has no desires or attachments or have his mind under his control. But when he is anchored in meditation, he doesn't sway away like the ones whose hearts are not anchored. The hermit is also a human being like the rest of us. And even he has the same desires like the rest of us. But what makes him different is that he remains steady and anchored while the others just get swept away by their desires. In verse 2.71, Lord says that such a hermit no longer competes for proprietorship or ego and hence lives in peace. He is detached from all objects, ideas, and relationships, which means that the hermit doesn't compete or care for positions in the society, for power or money or wealth. He never expects or claims proprietorship or ownership or awards or accolades for his deeds. He does what his dharma prescribes and avoids any and every action that leads to adharma. And in doing so, the hermit attains the stage of Brahmi and is free from the delusion and maintains his state till the end and finds moksha, which is freedom from all suffering and the endless cycle of birth and death, which is the ultimate goal of this human life. That is merging back with the Almighty and finding that eternal bliss. This brings us to the end of chapter 2. The next chapter is called Karma Yoga. Keep learning because knowledge will set you free. See you in the next video.